Welcome to the Download Podcast, the audio companion to the Download video show.
Tell me what you want, when you want it.
Featuring more trends and insights for digital marketers. Presented by
Microsoft Advertising.
The Download.
with your hosts, Jennifer Solomon-Baum and Jeffrey Colon.
Welcome to the Download Podcast. This is episode 10, brought to you by Microsoft Advertising and our friends at Shure Microphones. I'm Jeff Colon, head of the brand studio. Joining me, of course, is my creative partner in crime and rhyme, the notorious JSB, Jennifer Solomon-Baum. Jennifer, how are you?
Jeff, you're really good at introduction, I have to say. I'm good. How are you?
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm good. So what have you, let's start here. What have you read recently that gave you some interesting knowledge that you're like, wow, I got to share this with people?
I am actually reading a really interesting book by Rory Sutherland.
Oh, yes.
Yes, about creativity, marketing, and just continue to try to bring new ideas and just getting out of the noise and the lot and do things differently. And so we're reading this as a team, and it's really inspiring.
I love to hear that. I'm going to be honest with you and people listening. I need to find something new to read. I've been reading a lot of short form. I've been writing a lot, maybe too much, but a lot of it is on the subject that you just noted, like creativity, how we find more of that. I don't know. I feel like we're going into this sort of deep area of creativity again because, I don't know, we've been sort of not near each other for a while.
Yes. And I think that we need to really take care of ourselves as well because we're a little tired. This has been a long marathon race, triage mode for the last 18 months. And let's call the elephant in the room, we're tired.
Yeah.
And so resourcing yourself and finding creativity and inspiration is maybe harder than before.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of what we talked about earlier before we recorded this last week
or 2 months ago, who cares?
Sometime in that zone where it almost reminds me of you're coming off a turbulent period, which if we look at history, the late 60s turned into this period of the 1970s when people turned inward and reflected a little bit more. Do you think that is maybe the case with what's going on in the world now?
Yeah, and it's difficult actually to achieve that kind of peace and detaching yourself from everything. I read this really interesting article by David Sable around like observing the Shabbat and whatever religion or culture you belong to, but having one day per week where you disconnect completely.
Yes.
And unplug is really important. And getting also your sleep every night, I think is really important. And try to not multitask all the time. It feels like we're just getting into mental health advice today. But
which is actually, for those listening, they're probably like, wait a minute, I don't need some self-care.
Marketing podcast?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so let's talk about insights.
Yes, absolutely. So consumer behaviors have evolved, and the pandemic actually has accelerated certain emerging trends that we were already seeing. No surprise there, but we have really interesting data from our analytics team using first-party data along with industry research from our friends at Euromonitor. And we have identified two interesting new types of consumer. And I'm personally really interested by these two personas because I recognize myself and many people we know in them. And so these two personas, we're going to unpack them a little bit more, but one of them are called the Self Care Enthusiast. The second one is called the Empowered Activist. And why should we care, might ask? Because I think it's really fascinating to uncover new behaviors and how brand can continue to bring interesting messages to those two different types of consumer behaviors and personalities and personas, actually.
So, let's look at how some of these people behave. The self-care enthusiast, they're interested in spending time where it matters most, which makes sense, whether that's with their family, on their mental health, or staying fit. They seek brands that help enhance their physical and mental well-being. And they search terms like anxiety and stress, self-care and mental health. And according to a recent study published by the American Psychology Association, 2 in 3 adults in America, or 67% of Americans, stated they've experienced increased stress over the course of the pandemic. And
Not surprised.
all of these searches have increased since the pandemic. And that means that they have made changes in their lives, like staying healthy, exercising, eating better, and they're constantly multitasking between work, school, life, and leisure activities. So,
That sounds like me, actually. Like one of my typical day, like work email, shop online for groceries, because I do BOPIS all the time, or I just have everything delivered. I search for a therapist, or back to work on a meeting on Teams, planning for a family vacation and so forth. So it's always back and forth between work and life and all those things. And I think that sometimes that can create anxiety as well of trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah, I would say so. I think, a big advice for brands that want to reach the self-care enthusiast, and back me up here, JSB, is to be a little more personal, make it more personal, because self-care enthusiasts, you're putting yourself and your loved ones first. And so having messaging that may come to you that's very, do this and you'll get this, comes off as cold in sort of the world we've been in. So if you show that you care by, promoting products and messaging that enhances their lives and creates connection, I think you're fostering a truer connection there. So tell me about the Empowered Activist.
Yeah, quite a powerful name here. So the Empowered Activist votes with their wallet by purchasing from brands that align with their own values. They seek brands that are eco-friendly, inclusive, ethical, or small businesses. And it's funny because that's really big in my household. Like we have kids kind of the same age, Jeff.
Yeah.
And so I have my little 12-year-old who's a totally empowered activist, and so she chooses the clothes that she wants to buy based on the values of the company. And so there's also some interesting stats here. 38% of Americans are boycotting at least one company for lack of diversity.
Yeah.
Some call-outs for advertisers there, actually. And so 80% of Americans have made purchase decisions based on their values in the past year. No surprise there. 33% of survey respondents stopped using a brand based on its social action. So what you do as a brand and the values that you represent really have an impact on your bottom line. And so, okay, great. What do I do with this? So a couple of advice for brands here. One is continue to bring up your authenticity. Talk about your values. They matter. That's really important. And call out your product's ethical or green feature directly in your branded ad title. One is make sure that actually you don't forget those non-brand keywords that reflect those values. For instance, fair label, apparel, minority owned, etc. And we also have a really cool new product called Inclusive Business Attributes Ad Annotations. We don't often do like a product pop-up here, but this one is really worth calling out in this podcast today.
It fits in with what we're talking about here. Yeah,
exactly. And so there in your copy, you can mention if you have, if your business is carbon neutral, if you're wheelchair accessible, etc. So that is truly a key differentiator amongst the noise and amongst, your specific vertical. So we'll put the link in our show notes on where to find more details on all of these, but we love the Self-Care Enthusiast and the Empowered Activist.
Right on. And we want to remind our audience that the Download podcast is sponsored by Shure, makers of the microphone you've already heard. The Shure SM7B is the essential microphone for audio creators, and we're proud to have several here in our studio. Shure, the first choice for voice.
I like this microphone.
You're listening to the Download Podcast, presented by Microsoft Advertising, with JSB and Jeff. And now, time for this month's big interview.
You think you're big time?
All right, it is time for, I want to say it's our big interview. It's really our massive interview. JSB, who's with us?
It's massive. She writes about all things internet. She has a new book coming out titled Extremely Online, Gen Z, the Rise of Influencers and the Creation of a New American Dream on Simon & Schuster. And her pieces for the New York Times are consumed by everyone in the Silicon Valley and big tech. We're so glad to have Taylor Lorenz, tech reporter for the New York Times, joining us today on the podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Download.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get even serious with any, strong, opinionated question, let's take a minute to talk about Squid Game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jeff, you binged it. Don't reveal anything because Taylor and I...
No spoilers.
No spoilers. We're
No
episode 2 or 3.
spoilers. I love it. I think it's 1,000 times better than Black Mirror. It's a little different than that, but I think the reason it's resonating is because it's a reflection on the world we live in today.
I think so too. I mean, Black Mirror is such like an overt critique of technology in a way, and this is more like about sort of capitalism and our system and
Addiction.
yes,
Yeah.
and wanting, like aspirations and desire.
And inequity. Like, the
Yes.
fact that we're all like one incident away from being poor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love to, watch shows that are not made in the US. And, I think it's a glimpse into a different culture as well. I also read that the show was pitched 10 years ago and was refused. And now look at this. The #1 show on Netflix.
I read
I've
that
heard.
too. Like I think the creator had to at one point sell his laptop for like
Yeah.
$600 and something.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to pay off a debt. It's like, hey, I can't write this. I have to pay some debts off.
What's the lesson here? Persevere with your good ideas. It will pay off eventually. Maybe.
Yeah, hopefully.
So you recently moved from New York to LA. I have another soft question for you, but what's your favorite bagel shop in LA? Because I moved, a few years ago, longer than you, but I still haven't found my favorite
You know
bagel
what?
shop.
There was this article in the New York Times about I'm sure you read it. Caused a lot of controversy online
Yes.
about California having better bagels than New York.
Yep.
It is not true. I have not been able to find. I went to Courage Bagels, which is like very hyped. Have you been there?
Not yet.
It's good, but it's nothing compared to like a great New York bagel.
No, it's all those New Yorkers moving to LA and trying to recreate actually that culture. But isn't it in the water?
That's
The
what
water-
people say.
Yeah.
I think there's something
Yeah.
there. It's like coming out of the subway, schlepping to work. There's something about that environment that
How's the LA traffic treating you?
the traffic has been a lot. It's nice though to kind of be able to listen to podcasts such as this one, or have your own space. That's the one thing I like. I have so much stuff in my car now.
Yeah.
I just carry around a lot more stuff. In New York, I was very conscious, and now I'm like, I'm leaving the house. I'll grab that. I'll grab
Yep.
that. I'll grab that.
Not
Yeah.
a bad
You
thing.
have a bag in New York. You have a handbag or a backpack or something.
Here you have
that's
a
what
trunk.
You have. Yeah, here you have a trunk and a car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us the scoop on internet cultural trends. What should we be on the lookout?
Good question. There's a couple trends, and to be clear, I write mostly about communication technology, so social media, chat apps, things like that. And a couple of things that I'm seeing in this space are, one, this idea of moving to sort of like groups and segmenting out. I think a lot of the big social networks have gotten super oversaturated. It's almost harder to find your people. Obviously TikTok does that through the algorithm for you, but I think on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, it's a little bit hard. I think that's actually part of the reason why Twitter rolled out the communities tab now, where you can sort of start to segment yourself. You also see more people spending time in Discord. And then I've been writing a lot more about like crypto network type of stuff. And I think that's also, there's big shifts in terms of communication and like these like communities that are popping up around like NFTs. We see everyone with the avatar communities and things like that. Obviously it's a little bit of a bubble, but I think it shifts to broader things.
Have you written about Boring Ape Yacht Club yet?
I did. I know. Kyle Chayka scooped me. He wrote a fantastic piece on it for the New Yorker, and I couldn't beat it. But I have mentioned them in some stuff.
Yeah.
I think there was like a scam around something. I mean, there's always a scam in the NFT world. Doesn't narrow it down, but yeah, it's interesting to see all of that emerge. I also just think, I did write about this company Zed Run, which is the digital horses. Have you guys heard
No.
of that?
Tell me more.
Okay, so you can have these digital horses that race in the quote unquote metaverse and earn you money. And then you can also pay to breed them or make money that way. And it's basically like horse racing, but you have like equity in the game. It's very like,
How is that any different from going to the off-track betting parlor?
well, you own a stake of the horse. So you're not
okay.
just betting on
it.
a random horse. You actually own a stake in Ethereum. Look, whether or not Zed becomes a thing, I think that whole shift, will have a big implication in gaming. I do play a decent amount of Fortnite, and it's funny, even just playing that, I think about these like in-game items and playing, and I'm just like, why can I earn money,
Yeah.
playing this game? So I think it is kind of terrifying to think because there are all these implications around betting or money. You don't want people losing tons of money, but
Yeah, in gaming, I wonder why I can't make money from my daughters playing Genshin Impact and Roblox because they sure spend a lot of money there, Taylor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, we need more crystals. How much do those cost? Oh, my goodness. I'd love to be able to trade that in for real money
Yeah.
of some type. Yeah.
some Ethereum.
Yeah.
I think in a way, because Jeff and I have kids who are, between the age of 9 and 15, it's a good little laboratory for us to study and to stay in touch with what's going on as well. But, I look at the way that my kids are behaving also. Like we talked about Discord, that's where my son lives, and they watch a movie together on Twitch, and then he does his homework at the same time, quote unquote. And so I'm just wondering also, can we do one thing anymore? Because it seems that we do several things all the time. Again,
Yeah.
also my daughter, she's playing Roadblocks, and then she's also watching something on her phone on YouTube while coloring
Yeah.
a book at the same time. So it seems that everyone is always doing 3 things at the same time. And we're kind of like that too. We're watching something on TV, we're texting our friends and making comments. And so can people still read an article beyond the headlines or a book? You're about to release your book. Like,
I'm
what's
about
your
to
whole-
find out.
Yes, exactly. So what have you observed, and specifically for Gen Z, of this thing of doing all the things at the same time all the time?
I mean, I think that is definitely the way that people operate now, myself included.
Yeah.
We all have extremely short attention spans.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because I think our capacity for consumption is pretty high. A lot of people, and sometimes like it's like kind of why it's painful sometimes to watch a movie from the 50s. No hate to, old
slow.
movies, but it feels very slow.
Yeah.
So I think our pace is increasing. You mentioned study with me type of things, like these live streams. I think that like co-working almost digitally is a big thing, and it is a way to concentrate and tune other people out because you have, people call it body doubling sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's like you kind of have this like accountability partner.
Yeah.
And obviously Apple has all these screen time controls. I think as technology gets more and more addictive, we're going to have to do kind of like what they have in China where they like limit screen time, hopefully not by the government, but just like I think these platforms and products will build that stuff in.
Maybe the way we work also has kind of fostered this as well, because if you're in an open plan, you hear what's going on here and you have to do your work, and maybe there's a bit of that. You just mentioned government as well. I want your opinion about what do you think is the role of government into all those platforms as well? And we see big differences between what's happening in the US or in Europe or in Australia.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting challenge, and I don't know who has it figured out. It is slightly terrifying. I mean, I obviously watched that Blumenthal quote where he says, we will commit to ending Finsta, and you see these lawmakers say these cringy things, and it definitely scares me sometimes because those are the people that are going to hopefully regulate this technology. And I don't know what the best outcome is. I think that only right now is the public starting to grapple with it and recognize the power that these companies have over our lives and how sticky they are. I mean, all of that stuff that was revealed by the Wall Street Journal recently about the research Facebook did into sort of the harmful nature of Instagram for children, that just came out. I think people are really only just starting to take it seriously.
Yeah. We're speaking with Taylor Lorenz, tech reporter for the New York Times, who's got a new book coming out that she is writing that we hope everyone who's listening picks up. I have a question for you that falls into the area that you were talking about in terms of social media and, regulation. What advice would you give to like your 12-year-old self in terms of like, how much time should you be on some of these platforms?
Where to begin?
We have time.
Well, my 12-year-old self, like in the 90s, or like my current 12-year-old
No, say you're
self?
like a 12, yeah.
A
just your
12-year-old
current
now.
12-year-old self. That's right.
I would say to not tie your identity so closely to what people on the internet think of you. And trust me, that's something I struggle with as a fully formed adult. I can barely take it, and I have a decent sized audience. I think it's hard. But I think when you're young and forming your identity, it's even harder. It's really hard to have that amount of feedback about yourself, especially on platforms like TikTok, right? Where like you don't even control the distribution of your content, and you can get just feedback from so many different types of people. And it's really important to have a very strong sense of self and a very strong like sense of confidence.
Yeah.
I would also, I worry a lot about the misinformation that children will believe. Obviously, no 12-year-old is going to be super media literate, but it is kind of terrifying a lot of the stuff that kids will get sucked into, because you can start going down that wrong rabbit hole where suddenly you're being radicalized, right? Or people are preying on you and they're scamming you out of your parents' money by selling you schemes. Yeah,
it's an interesting world.
Yeah.
I do think you have to teach kids that. I don't think there's any amount of monitoring that parents can do ever. And you kind of don't want that. It's like you have to teach your kid. It has to come from within.
Yeah.
I so agree with that.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about some of the Silicon Valley and those who have kids saying, well, my children don't have any device. You can't live in a bubble like this. You have to educate your kids and make them smart digital citizen in a way. It's not easy, but you can't completely remove them from them. I mean, I still have a limit for my kids.
Definitely.
But,
I mean, I'm all for screen time limits.
Yeah.
I just think there's always going to be times. I think about one kid that I wrote about a while ago who's this huge meme account kid. He had tens of thousands of followers, and he was telling me how he had not told his parents about his parents knew about his account, but then said that he couldn't do it for a while. And so he was going to Best Buy and he was going on the computers there and just logging in there for a few hours. And I just think, that sounds very much like what I would have done as a teen.
Absolutely. You always are trying to figure out how to get around a rule of some type.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, you're not supposed to do this. Oh, I'm not doing it. Not in the house. I found sort of a way to do it outside.
On that, actually, what are the cultural differences that you have seen of, maybe what's going on here or in the UK or in Europe in terms of, not forbidding things because automatically they become more attractive, but just a different way of approaching things and becoming more smart and educated about how you deal with things.
I generally cover America, so I think it's so different, especially in Asian culture.
Yes.
I think gaming is everyone has their own thing. I definitely think, at least in the States where I cover, it's just really important to teach your kids from a very young age not to believe everything on the internet, but to remain skeptical and teach them self-confidence, basic things like that. And obviously limit their time, if they're engaging in unhealthy behaviors. But it can be hard. I mean, I have a lot of teenage cousins and I've watched them evolve over the internet personally and post some things that definitely are problematic that I'm like, oh my God, don't put that online, but it's hard. I mean, I think of bullying too. I don't know if you guys have struggled with that, but it can feel so overwhelming, to have it, because you can have these people just weaponize the internet against you, and it can feel so huge. You can have 15 people harassing you, but it just can feel overwhelming because that's sort of this 24/7 portal that you have with you that gives people from the outside access to your world.
It's almost given me pause in some respects on not even posting as much anymore as I think I have over the last 15 years because of what you said. You almost are worried that there might be a repercussion of some type.
I definitely post less now than I used to. I'm definitely still a poster. I wrote a story for The Atlantic a couple years ago about what I interviewed dozens of kids about the first time they Googled themselves and the first time they realized that they had an internet presence. And it was really interesting. I talked to parents as well, but all of these kids, usually between the ages of 7 and 10, discovered that they had this narrative, that their life narrative was basically driven by parents. One kid logged on and he finally got an Instagram account at 13 and he realized there's already a hashtag for his name with his baby pictures going back years that his mother had put on. Or, these classrooms will put, parents know this, right? The classrooms will have a blog, or your sports team is uploading photos of your kids on the internet. And it's so hard to control the narrative of your own life anymore on the internet. And I think it's really important to teach kids to be intentional about that.
And go back to reading books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We may have to do more of that if certain services go out of power for 7 hours.
Oh, yeah. That would be nice. Hey, I'm always curious also where people get their inspiration. So what's your favorite podcast of the moment?
That's a really good question. I like this one called The Content Mines. Have you guys heard of it?
No.
Nope.
Tell us about this.
It's these two creators. It's Luke something and Ryan Broderick, who used to be at BuzzFeed. And they're both just kind of internet guys, but they talk a lot about media and internet trends, and they sort of critically dissect them in different ways. And they're both just very smart about the internet. I know I'm recommending a podcast by two white guys or whatever. But
JSPs.
it is good. I listen. It is my favorite favorite one to listen to. I also love the podcast Who Weekly. Do you guys know about that one?
Nope. Oh my
No.
God, we need to catch up with our podcast.
These are amazing podcasts. Well, Who Weekly is awesome, and it's a pop culture podcast, and it's all about people who are essentially like D-list celebrities, but not celebrities. It's people that have online fame in different ways, and it sort of deconstructs it in a very funny way, and they talk about these different online phenomena, and it's
Interesting.
Great. So.
We need to listen to those.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah.
was telling Jeff the other day, I was actually looking for a quote from a woman in the marketing and advertising business, and it was not easy. So who are you following? Who is the woman thought leader that you're inspired by?
There is a woman, Kat Cole from Atlanta. I think she used to work for like Cinnabon or something. She's a marketer. I think her name is Tressie too at Chipotle. I've quoted her a few times. She's like head of marketing at Chipotle. Trying to think of who I go to as for quotes. I mean, as a journalist, I love to follow other journalists in this space. I definitely follow more media people than marketers, no shade. I love people like Katie Natopoulos, who digs into kind of like funny, weird things on the internet.
Katie's good. She's a fun person. to
She's
follow.
like, I mean, I've always kind of like been so inspired by her work. And now there's so many of these young reporters too on my beat. I always read Insider, Business Insider.
Yep.
They've got a great newsletter about kind of like the quote unquote creator economy. So I read that. I read Kaya Urif at The Information.
I was just talking about Kaya the other day to JSB.
She's
love that.
amazing.
That newsletter is great. That's essential.
She's so good. She was really good at CNN too, but I feel like she was not, like her stuff was getting buried. And this newsletter by The Information, I mean, props to The Information because they never really covered the stuff that I write about before, which is sort of internet stuff, online creators. And they really just launched this newsletter all about it. It's kind of like a must read for anybody that cares about the creator world. It's a great mix of like tech stuff. They do interviews with creators. It's like they're on top of trends. They've got little exclusive quotes and profiles, and it's just, it's great.
Yeah.
I have one more question. So, because also our audience is marketers, you know, so with all this culture of creators and content creators and big followers and whatnot, what's the one advice that you would give brands and marketers on how to tap into this opportunity if they haven't so far?
Yeah, well, I think it's so hard for brands, obviously, because you have to kind of figure out what your goals are. There's definitely a time in the mid 2010s, 2016, 2017, where there was this idea of scale and people just wanted like the biggest person, right?
Yep.
Now I think marketers have gotten smarter around that. And also we just have more like analytics capabilities. So I think it's about kind of determining like what you want and in what capacity want to work with someone, whether it's co-developing a product with someone. It's always better to have a more integrated marketing campaign than just paying somebody to post, which is great. But it's like, how can we like leverage this person so that the partnership makes sense? One other thing I would say is just be very open to working with people that might be a little non-traditional or a little bit smaller, you know, like sometimes those people can end up blowing up and you've gotten in on the ground level, or sometimes they just have a super passionate fan base and it keeps you looking cool. You know, you don't want to just work with like the 10 big people that everyone already knows.
Micro-influencer, should we say?
Yeah, micro influencers. And also I think just the idea of influence is changing, right? Like people used to think, oh, just some pretty girl on Instagram posting with a product. I think now people understand like maybe there's a really cool streamer that we can do some kind of streaming integration with, or, you know, even podcasters, or, you know, there's all these different types of creators. A newsletter, an independent newsletter that's really cool. It's all about sort of tapping into those different audiences online.
Like micro authors. Speaking of, plug your book for our audience. What's the name of it? When's it coming out?
It's called Extremely Online. It's all about the rise of the creator world and how that's impacted Gen Z. I think marketers will find it extremely useful because it talks about this whole entire industry, how it emerged, how people have leveraged it, and kind of what looking forward of kind of like how things are going to evolve and how young people move through the internet. It's coming out. God, book timelines are so weird. And I keep being like, what year are we even in? So late 2020, or wait, we're in 2021.
We are.
It's
I
coming
think.
out. Yeah, probably late 2022 or early 2023. It's
right.
due in a couple months. So pick it up. I think you can
Awesome.
pre-order
So
it
we
soon.
took your advice. We found someone influential before they blew up.
Exactly.
Awesome. Taylor Lorenz, a tech reporter for the New York Times, has a new book coming out. Thanks so much for joining me and JSB here on The Download.
Thanks for having me.
And now, The Download presents Trends with Benefits. Woohoo! New developments in marketing we are infatuated with.
This is one of our favorite segments on the show. JSB, share with our audience one of your trends with a benefit.
So this one maybe is a little bit different than usual, but I think we have to talk about the Great Resignation. It's everywhere in the press, and that's a lot of people are talking about. We have experienced this ourselves. A lot of our colleagues have left and taken on new jobs. We've hired some people. But again, some interesting statistics here that are worth mentioning. 40% of people want to change jobs this year. Remote job posting on LinkedIn have increased over 5 times since the pandemic. And lucky us, the highest talent turnover industries are tech, retail, and media. So we're in the middle of the storm. And so I think that sometimes it's easy to think about, oh, let's just change job. But, there's a lot of implications for that, So people are working to provide. We work because we like what we're doing, but sometimes you don't have that many options. But I think that if there is one lesson from the pandemic is your job aligned to your life values? And again, we go back to purpose. And, it has been sort of a big introspection and self-reflection for a lot of people of, do I do what I really like to do? We spend a lot of time working every day. So you have to love the people you work with and you have to be passionate about what you do. And it's not always easy.
Again, is this a marketing podcast or an existential philosophical podcast?
Isn't it one and the same? I don't know. How can you dissociate? Work and life is all blended together.
That's right. Work and life does blend together.
But maybe one benefit and maybe one advice for brands is, we were looking at this the other day on LinkedIn. A lot of the job posting denotes specifically that work location is flexible. And if you don't offer that in your job offering, well, people are going to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's something that we have to definitely keep a check on.
What's yours?
All right, my trend, BOPIS, or buy online, pick up in store, is leading to a return of brick and mortar retail.
Ooh.
So we've seen this really take over as of recently. I was walking in Venice recently with our producer of the show, and we saw an Away luggage boutique. Away, as we know, or for those who are listening who don't know, is really a direct-to-consumer luggage brand. And there is a brick-and-mortar store. Yep. We also know that Warby Parker recently had initial public offering. They're now a public company. Yep. They sell glasses online, and their growth plan for this entire next year is around physical retail, physical places you can go and try on glasses. And I actually think, Jennifer, they may still want you to purchase online, but they may actually move some of that and say, hey, we have some things in stock. Let's just actually allow people to purchase in a physical location, which takes advantage of this BOPIS trend that we're, looking at. Bella and Canvas, big wholesale apparel company in Los Angeles. Their growth plan has really been in digital for the last couple of years, but now they have a physical boutique on Melrose Avenue. I mean, what I'm getting at here with this trend is physical did not die. All of the thought leaders that thought that physical retail was pretty much over, I think the pandemic has maybe allowed us to awaken ourselves to the fact, maybe I want to try on that pair of pants in a physical location. Maybe I do want to actually go in and pick things up and look around a little bit more at some things to inspire me. That's really what the whole commerce and shopping experience is about. So I definitely think it's something for us to watch. And I definitely think there is going to be more integration between physical and digital as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think that, again, sometimes you have to experience and touch the product and try it on and sit on this couch or try those glasses on. Yeah, you just don't want to queue to pay for your product, actually.
No, that's not fun whatsoever.
No, not at all.
All right, so those are our trends with benefits for episode 10. Make sure to check out episode 10 of our video show. You can watch that at youtube.com/Microsoft Advertising. And thanks for rating, reviewing, and subscribing to our podcast. JSB, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye, Jeff. Have a safe trip back to Seattle.
You got it. And for all you listeners out there, we'll check you next episode.
You've been listening to the Download Podcast with Jennifer Solomon-Baum and Jeffrey Colon. All thoughts are their own. To watch the Download video show, visit MicrosoftAdvertising.com/thedownload.